Welcome back to Irregular Mind. Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to have you here for another deep dive into the fascinating journey of US history. If you are just tuning in for the first time, a huge welcome to you. And all our regular listeners, thank you for coming back. I appreciate you more than words can say. If you haven't had a chance to listen to our previous episodes, I highly recommend checking them out. We have traced the footsteps of the earliest civilizations, witnessed the age of exploration, and explored the opening of Atlantic world. You will find stories about Spanish Armada, the fur trade, and the hunt for the Northwest Passage, and more. Trust me, you don't want to miss those. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I have a quick favor to ask. If you are enjoying Irregular Mind, please take a moment to rate, follow, and share this podcast with your friends and family. Your support makes a huge difference and helps this podcast reach more history enthusiasts just like you. And don't forget to leave a comment or send in your feedback. I would love to hear from you. Today, we are stepping into a brand new century, the 1600s. This period marks the birth of Colonial America, a time when European settlements expanded, cultures clashed, and a new identity began to form on this vast continent. We will start by focusing on Virginia, the colony that laid the groundwork for what would become the United States. From there, we will zoom out to explore the 13 colonies, their regional differences, and the tensions that began to brew between the settlers and their rulers across the Atlantic. And as we move through this chapter of the history, we will uncover the events that eventually led to the famous midnight cry: the British are coming. So, buckle up. This is going to be an episode filled with triumph, struggle, and the earliest whispers of rebellion. Let's go. The story of Virginia begins with Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in Americas, established in 1607. While the early years were fraught with starvation, disease, and conflict with indigenous people, the colony eventually found its footing. This turnaround was largely thanks to tobacco, introduced by John Rolfe. Tobacco farming became the economic backbone of the colony, spurring growth and attracting settlers looking for prosperity in the New World. As Virginia grew, so did the need for governance. In 1619, the House of Burgesses was established, marking the first representative legislative assembly in the American colonies. This institution provided a platform for settlers to address their concerns and establish laws, laying the foundation for the democratic ideals that would later shape the nation. The growth of Jamestown and its insatiable demand for land led to increasing tensions with the Powhatan Confederacy. These tensions erupted into the Second Anglo-Powhatan War, which started in 1622 and ended in 1632. Although the Powhatan made a strong effort to push back the English settlers, they were ultimately defeated. This marked a significant shift in the power dynamics, with Native Americans being further marginalized as English expanded their territory. As tobacco farming thrived, so did the demand for labor. Initially, Virginia relied on indentured servants from Europe, individuals who worked under contract for a set number of years in exchange for passage to the New World. However, as the flow of European laborers slowed, colonists turned to enslaved Africans to meet the labor demand. This transition marked a profound and tragic shift in the colony's social and economic structure. The mid 1600s saw blurred lines between indentured servitude and slavery. This instability culminated in Bacon's rebellion in 1676, a rebellion led by Nathaniel Bacon against the ruling elites of Virginia. The rebellion, fueled by frustrations over land, labor, and governance, exposed the fragility of colony's labor system. In its aftermath, the ruling class moved to institutionalize the race-based slavery, creating a clear divide between enslaved Africans and European laborers to prevent future alliances. Let us look into something really important when we talk about history of slavery in the Americas. The term is chattel slavery. Now, what does that mean? The word actually comes from the Latin term capital, which means property or possession. And that's the heart of it. Chattel slavery is a system where enslaved individuals are treated as property, not as people, like livestock or goods. They could be bought, sold, traded, or even inherited. Here are the key characteristics that made chattel slavery so distinct and brutal. First, it was permanent. If someone was enslaved, it was for life. And here is the worst part: this status was passed down. A child born to an enslaved mother was automatically enslaved too. Second, enslaved people are stripped of all rights. No legal protections, no human rights, no nothing. The owner had total control over them, their labor, their movements, even their personal lives. Last but not the least, this system wasn't about morality, it was about economics. Large scale agriculture like plantations in Americas needed massive amount of labor to produce crops like sugar, tobacco and cotton. Enslaved people were seen as an economic asset, a way to keep profits soaring. Now, let us get back to the history. With the transition to chattel slavery, enslaved Africans became property for life and their status was passed down to their descendants. To enforce this system, slave courts were established, stripping enslaved people of basic rights and solidifying their subordinate status in the society. These laws also served to control and suppress potential uprisings, ensuring the dominance of the planter elite. Amid these harsh realities of slavery, enslaved Africans began to forge a unique and resilient culture. Many embraced Christianity, blending it with African spiritual traditions to create a deeply personal and communal faith. Enslaved people expressed themselves through music, dance, and storytelling, preserving their heritage while adapting to their new environment. Despite the constant threat of separation, enslaved families formed strong bonds, relying on one another for emotional and practical support. Spiritual practices provided solace and a sense of hope, reinforcing a shared identity and resilience. Virginia's evolution in the 1600s set the stage for the broader development of American colonies. Its economic success, driven by tobacco and the labor system, became the model for other colonies. At the same time, the establishment of representative governance and the institutionalization of slavery laid the groundwork for the complexities of American society. The system of chattel slavery that took root in Virginia would have lasting repercussions for centuries. It entrenched racial divisions and created an economic system dependent on exploitation of enslaved laborers. This legacy would shape not only Virginia but the entire nation as it grappled with the contradictions between its ideals of freedom and the reality of systemic oppression. Virginia's story is one of triumph, tragedy, and transformation. From its early struggles to its role as cornerstone of colonial America, the colony's history offers a window into the forces that shaped the United States. Let's continue unraveling this journey as we move forward into the broader story of the 13 colonies. The story of colonial America cannot be told without understanding the 13 colonies, the foundation of what would later become the United States. These colonies, though united under British rule, were diverse in culture, structure, and economy, reflecting the complexities of life in early America. The colonies were classified into three main types, each defined by how they were governed. There were chartered colonies. These were established through a charter granted by the British Crown to a company or a group of settlers. They had high degree of self-governance. Example is Massachusetts Bay and Rhode Island, where settlers sought religious freedom and autonomy. The next one is proprietary colonies. In these colonies, the crown granted land to one or more proprietors who had full governing rights. Pennsylvania, established by William Penn as a haven for Quakers, is a notable example of this type. Then comes the royal colonies. These colonies were directly governed by the crown, with a royal governor overseeing administration. Example includes Virginia and Georgia, where the monarchy maintained the strict control to safeguard its interests. The Puritans and Pilgrims were pivotal in shaping the religious and cultural identity of early colonial America. While both groups sought freedom from religious persecutions, their approaches were distinct. The Puritans aimed to reform Church of England from within, believing it had restrained too many Catholic practices. On the other hand, the Pilgrims, as separatists, sought complete independence from the church, feeling it was beyond saving. These groups established settlements that would become iconic symbols of perseverance and faith. Let us dive into one of the interesting episodes in the US history, which in fact was the starting point of my search and reading spree about this country. In the year 1620, a group of 102 passengers set sail from England aboard a small, weathered ship called Mayflower. Among them were pilgrims, a group of separatists fleeing religious persecutions, and other settlers seeking new opportunities. Their goal? To establish a colony in the New World where they could freely practice their beliefs and build a better life. The journey was arduous, lasting over 2 months across the rough Atlantic. Cramped conditions, illness, and stormy seas tested their resolve. Originally bound for the Virginia colony, their ship was blown off course and they landed instead in the cold, uncharted shores of what it is now Massachusetts, which is far north. As they prepared to step onto the unfamiliar land, the pilgrims realized they needed a framework or governance to ensure order and unity. In the cramped quarters of the ship, they drafted the Mayfair Compact, an agreement to form a civil body politic. This compact was revolutionary for its time, as it established self-governance based on majority rule and mutual cooperation. It planted the seeds of democracy in the New World and became a cornerstone of American political traditions. After signing the compact, the Pilgrims disembarked at Plymouth Rock, ready to face the challenges of building a settlement in a harsh, unfamiliar environment. Their determination and the foundations they laid would echo through history. The Pilgrims faced harsh conditions during their first winter in 1620. With nearly half of the settlers succumbing to cold, illness, and starvation, in the spring of 1621, they encountered Squanto, a member of the Patuxet tribe who spoke English, having been previously enslaved and later freed. Squanto played a crucial role in teaching the Pilgrims vital survival skills such as planting corn, fishing, and foraging in unfamiliar land. By the fall of 1621, after their first successful harvest, the Pilgrims organized a 3-day feast to give thanks for their survival and the help they received. They invited Massasoit, the leader of Wampanoag Confederacy, and approximately 90 Wampanoag men to join them in their celebration. The event, later romanticized as the first Thanksgiving, symbolized cooperation and gratitude, though the relationship between settlers and indigenous people would grow strained as the colony expanded. Today, Thanksgiving is celebrated annually in the United States as a national holiday of gratitude, family gatherings, and feasting. However, many indigenous people view it as a national day of mourning, a reminder of displacement, oppression, and suffering experienced by native communities in the wake of colonization. This dual perspective highlights the complex legacy of Thanksgiving in American history. And people, I started by searching for what is Thanksgiving. And here I am talking on a podcast, and luckily you are listening to it. Earlier, we spoke about the 13 colonies. Each of the 13 colonies belonged to one of 3 regions, each with distinct characteristics that influenced their development. First, let us look at the New England colonies. The New England colonies included Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and the New Hampshire. These colonies were characterized by their focus on community, religion, and education, with economies centered around fishing, shipbuilding, and small-scale farming. Now let us look at what happened in the 17th century in Massachusetts, which was a bit interesting read. Massachusetts holds a dark chapter in the colonial history, the Salem witch trials of 1692. In this deeply religious Puritan community, a combination of fear, superstition, and societal pressure spiraled into chaos. It all began when young girls in Salem village exhibited strange behaviors, including fits and trances, which were interpreted as signs of witchcraft. Under pressure from local leaders and a fervent belief in the devil's presence, accusations spread like wildfire. Over 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, ranging from marginalized to respected community members. 20 people were executed, including 19 by hanging, and one, Giles Corey, who was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. Many others languished in jail under harsh conditions. The trials eventually ended when skepticism about validity of the evidence, including spectral visions, grew among community leaders. The Salem witch trials remain a cautionary tale about dangers of mass hysteria, scapegoating, and the misuse of authority. Today, they stand as a somber reminder of how fear can override reason and justice. Going a bit northwest from there, we see New Hampshire. It was deeply affected by King Philip's War, which was between 1675 and 1678, a brutal conflict between indigenous people led by Metacom, also known as King Philip, and the New England colonists. The war resulted in significant loss of life and marked one of the last major efforts by Native Americans to resist colonial expansion in New England. When we go south from there, we get into middle colonies. The middle colonies included New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Known for their diversity and tolerance, these colonies attracted settlers from across Europe and became hubs of commerce and agriculture. Pennsylvania, founded by William Penn, was a haven for religious and ethnic diversity. The Mason Dixon line, surveyed between 1763 and 1767 by British astronomers Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon, was originally intended to resolve a border dispute between Pennsylvania and Maryland. Disputes over land ownership and overlapping claims had led to violent skirmishes known as the Cresap's War. The line was meticulously surveyed using astronomical observations and marked with stone markers, some of which bore the Penn and Calvert family crests. Though initially a practical solution to colonial boundary issues, the Mason-Dixon line took a deeper significance over time. By 19th century, it became a symbolic divide between free states in the north and slave states in the south, cementing its place in the American history during Civil War era. Southern colonies included Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. These colonies relied heavily on agriculture, particularly cash crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo, and were deeply tied to the system of slavery. Georgia, a southern state, was founded in 1733 by James Oglethorpe, had two purposes: to act as a buffer colony against Spanish-controlled Florida and to provide a fresh start for debtors and the impoverished from England. Oglethorpe envisioned Georgia as a place where people burdened by debt could rebuild their lives, free from the pressures of harsh debtors' prisons back home. Initially, slavery and large landholding were banned to promote equality, but economic pressures eventually led to adoption of plantation systems mirroring the other southern colonies. Georgia had the name Debtors' Colony because it was supposed to support debtors from England. Georgia also played a key role in enforcing the Navigations Act, a series of British laws designed to regulate colonial trade. First passed in the mid 1600s, these acts required that all goods traded by the colonies be transported on English or colonial ships and pass through England before being sold elsewhere. This ensured that profits flowed back to the British Crown and reinforced England's control over colonial economies. While these laws aimed to consolidate British economic power, they fueled growing resentment among colonists, who felt their economic freedom was being stifled. Over time, this discontent sowed the seed of rebellion against British rule. The 13 colonies were not a monolith. Their differences in governance, economy, and culture created a patchwork of communities, each contributing uniquely to the story of colonial America. From the Puritan ideals of New England to the plantation economies of South, these colonies set the stage for birth of a nation. Colonial America was far from homogeneous. As I said earlier, the 13 colonies developed distinct regional identities shaped by differences in population, economy, governance, and the role of slavery. These identities were influenced by geography, resources, and the cultural backgrounds, leading to a patchwork of societies that occasionally clashed but also began to form a unique American identity. The southern colonies, including Virginia, Maryland, and the Carolinas, and Georgia, developed a culture and economy centered on agriculture and plantations. The southern economy thrived on large plantations producing cash crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo. These plantations required significant labor, which entrenched slavery as an economic cornerstone. Wealthy planters, often located in the fertile Tidewater region, formed an elite ruling class and controlled the local politics and commerce. The success of plantation system relied heavily on enslaved African labor, creating a society deeply tied to the slavery and its associated inequalities. The region's reliance on enslaved labor led to demographic imbalance, with large populations of enslaved people outnumbering free settlers in some areas. The South embraced governance through bicameral legislatures, such as Virginia's House of Burgesses, which allowed elite landowners to dominate decision making. Northern colonies, particularly New England, focused on community life, trade, and religious values. Towns were the center of social, economic, and religious life. Meeting houses served as hub for community gatherings and governance. The economy was diverse with industries such as shipbuilding, fishing, and small scale manufacturing. The rocky soil limited large scale farming, but the trade and commerce flourished there. While slavery was less central to the northern economy, it existed in smaller numbers, primarily in port cities for domestic services. Puritans emphasized hard work, education, and a strong moral code, influencing the region's law and culture. The middle colonies, including Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware, represented a blend of northern and southern characteristics. The middle colonies produced both crops like wheat and corn and manufactured goods benefiting from fertile soil and growing cities. Enslaved labor was present, but on a smaller scale, often in urban centers for specific industries. The middle colonies were most ethnically and religiously diverse, with settlers from England, Germany, and Netherlands, and even from Scandinavia. These colonies exhibited a combination of town meetings and proprietary governance, reflecting their diverse population. Apart from these three regional identities, there is one more identity that we have to talk about: the backcountry identity. The backcountry refers to the frontier areas of the colonies stretching from Appalachian Mountains to the western edges of settled territories. Settled by Scots, Irish, Germans, and other immigrants, the backcountry was characterized by small scale farming, hunting, and self reliance. Its isolation fostered a distinct culture of independence and mistrust of centralized authority. These regional identities eventually clashed as economic, cultural, and political differences deepened. The South's dependence on slavery and hierarchical plantation societies often conflicted with the North's emphasis on trade, industry, and Puritan values. Meanwhile, the middle colonies, with their diversity and blend of economies, sometimes acted as a bridge between these opposing cultures. The backcountry's fiercely independent spirit resisted the influence of coastal elites and centralized governance. These tensions laid the groundwork for disputes over representations, taxation, and slavery, which could culminate in the larger conflicts that shaped the Revolutionary era. Despite these regional differences, a shared sense of identity began to emerge in the colonies. The blending of diverse cultures from the northern towns, southern plantations, and the backcountry's independent spirit began creating a uniquely American ethos. Shared challenges, like navigating conflicts with indigenous people, surviving harsh environments, and growing tensions with British control, helped unite the colonies despite their differences. Increasing resentment of British taxation, restrictive trade practices, and political overreach laid the groundwork for a collective push towards the self governance and eventual revolution. And there you have it, another deep dive into the foundations of colonial America. From the stories of Virginia's rise to the unique identities of 13 colonies, we have seen how these diverse and often conflicting landscape shaped the early American experience. These struggles, successes, and regional differences planted the seeds for what has to come: a growing push for independence and unity. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed exploring these pivotal moments in history as much as I did sharing them with you. If you are enjoying Irregular Mind, I have a small favor to ask again. Please rate, follow, and share this podcast with your friends, family, or anyone you know curious about history. Your support helps this podcast grow and keeps us bringing you more stories from the past. And if you have any thoughts, feedbacks, or ideas, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear them from you. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll dive into the rising tensions and that set the stage of revolutionary changes. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time on Irregular Mind. Thank you and take care.